Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out of this world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here is the host of The Pleasure Zone, sex, relationship, and intimacy coach and holistic health practitioner, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. Today we're going to have some fun unlocking the mind-body connection. And in fact, I feel like I have so much to say on this that I've made this a two-part series. So part one, I'm going to totally geek out on like the neuroscience, maybe tap into some of the somatic stuff. And then the next part two, we're going to geek out on some other things more tantric related and like sexual qigong related. So that's where we're at today. I don't know about you guys, but I know that I have been seeing a lot of things over the last 20, 25 years. I don't know who's even that old that's listening to this show. Some of us are. That actually have a lot to do with the mind-body connection. You know, there's always been the mind-body spirit. Well, there is a lot of things, not only that we know just from our sense or feeling that these things are connected, but there are now and have been over the last few decades, a lot of research that indicates that there are mind-body connections to different things, especially pleasure. And, you know, a lot of this research actually stems back to some of the early pioneers, the masters, for sure, Masters and Johnson, did a lot of research on the different ways that the bodies were being stimulated and how that had impact on heart rate and different things like how much sweat was happening or different arousal factors in the body that they could measure. So we know for several decades now that there is proof that backs that there is like a neurological effect on the body when there's pleasure. It's not just like your genitals are being aroused. It's actually your brain giving you these great orgasms. Your brain is the sexiest part of your body. And I don't just say that because I'm sapiosexual and I love a good brain. Like, what a turn on to be around geniuses, genius thoughts. And yeah, so that's, I mean, brains are super sexy, but the fact that we have proof that brains bring us our pleasure is so cool. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today. And why on earth would I talk about this stuff? Well, one of the reasons is that I love talking about sex and pleasure. A, I'm actually a sex and intimacy coach. B, that came to me when I was pretty young. I've had a fascination with sex and pleasure and all things to do with all things actually in the realm of sex and sexuality since I was pretty young. And by pretty young, I'm saying like prepubescent. Like these things fascinated me. I didn't have words for them. And the more that I studied and learned things, the more fascinated I became. And then the more fascinated I became, the more I studied it. And for the last over 10 years, while I've had the Pleasure Zone, and I get to do research and listen to talks, go to classes, study, you know, books and all different kinds of researchers, watch documentaries, all the kinds of things that are research-based. Other than I haven't had like my own committed research on any specific topic, which I might in my lifetime might actually do research, which I think my research would be very much somatic based and also possibly energy based. I'm not sure, but if anybody wants to do, keep that in mind for the future, probably 5 or 10 years from now. I'm really curious because I don't think the technology is out there yet for the things I'd want to measure. Anyway, that's for another day. So, what brings me here is my curiosity. What keeps me here is you guys. So I love hearing from you guys. I love all your comments that you put out on all over the place. When you guys comment on YouTube, when you send me messages privately, when you are sharing my videos and my audios, and and I'm getting feedback, that keeps me going. And I love when I get messages like, I love listening to your show. This show happens every week, guys. It's been happening every week, pretty much, unless I've had times where I couldn't come on live for various reasons. This show has been live every week for 10 years, pretty much. Over 10 years, 10 and a half years. So 10 and a half actually this month. Yeah, I think we just hit the 10 and a half mark. So a lot of topics, a lot of different things I've talked about. And part of what I studied in my life is actually a lot to do with bodies and health. And so talking to you guys about the different hormones that we're going to be talking about when we're talking about the neuroscience and the different parts of the brain that get activated during pleasure, all of this is because I'm a nerd. And I love knowing how and why things work. And I think I didn't always realize that that's what I was into, that I was kind of like an engineer of bodies and I like to know how things work. I would say it's more engineer-like. Like I don't want to do surgery necessarily. I just like to know how it works. So I like to know the inner workings of things. And so today, one of the things we're going to be talking about when it comes to this whole mind-body connection for pleasure is that we're going to be talking about how the brain and the nervous system process pleasure. And so sit back, relax. You're going to be in for like a total nerd fest tonight. You're going to be sitting back going, what is that word? Maybe you know these words. Maybe you're already in it with me. Maybe you're like totally nerding out with me and enjoying like all the information that we have so far. I have to put it that way because science does change all the time. We're always getting new information as new experiments are going on, as new insights are coming through, as new technologies come up so that things can be measured in different ways. So for now, for now, if you're looking at the show, look at the show date, you'll know what date we're looking at. For now, this is the information that we have available to us. So who knows, maybe in 10 years when I do like my 20th anniversary show, maybe we'll have more information on this. I have to tell you that when I started this show, I never would have thought, and I think I even did shows in the first 2 years going, I can't even imagine what it would be like to say that I've had a show for 10 years and I don't even know where the time's gone. So if you've thought about having a podcast and you're like, I don't know what I've got in me. I was the person who thought I had maybe 4 or 5 episodes in me. Who knew it was going to be 10 years? If you love doing research talking, if you love finding your expertise and sharing it with the world, definitely come over to Inspired Choices Network. You can always have a meeting with somebody who can walk you through what is available. So no, I don't get paid to say that. So I'm just saying, I like having a production team. So if you want one too, you know where to go. All right. So how does the brain work and how does our nervous system process pleasure? There's a few ways. So what we're going to talk about is the neurobiological experience that has different brain regions involved. It has actually multiple brain regions involved. There's also neurotransmitters involved, and our brain is pretty much like a really amazing computer. That if you could imagine that if you pressed the correct buttons and sent the right messages, that your computer would get like orgasmic and things would light up and you would know that you were hitting the pleasure centers. I'm sure that there will be computers coming in the future that will let us know if they're aroused. That's such a wild thought. Anyway, but our brains basically are like amazing computers, and they have ways of lighting, like our brain and our nervous system has ways of lighting up so that we do have those kind of like lights going off. And when our brains are measured through like MRIs and different visual techniques, so you can get an image of the brain, CAT scans and that sort of thing, they can see where the brain lights up when you are turned on. There was actually research done with a woman who could breathe and I think she still does this. She could meditate and breathe herself into orgasm without touching herself. And they put her into, I think it was an MRI. And what they found was that the parts of her brain that lit up were totally connected to pleasure areas. So the nucleus accumbens totally lit up. They knew that her prefrontal cortex was lighting up. And what they found was that people who were masturbating and having orgasms that way had the same parts of their brain light up. So she absolutely had the ability to think herself into orgasm. It's not that she's solo on that. She actually trains people to do that. She used to be based in New York, and I don't know where she's based anymore. But I do find that a lot of the great sex researchers are usually based either in New York or San Francisco. There you go. Sometimes they're randomly scattered throughout other parts of the world, but those are some top areas to find sex researchers, classes, and all kinds of interesting things related to sex. I mean, they're pretty open areas. That's probably why. So we're going to talk about first the parts of the brain that process pleasure. So there's a pretty complex network that we're going to be talking about. And one of them, the parts, is the reward system, which is also known as the dopaminergic pathway. Don't worry about spelling that. It's like dopamine, dopaminergic pathway. It's the brain's reward system. So it's the part of the brain that's responsible for us feeling pleasure and desiring reinforcement of that pleasure. So we'll seek that thing that gives us pleasure repeatedly. That's our reward system. So when we experience something pleasurable, whether it's like eating really good cake or really great sex or touch that we like, or maybe it's a movie that we are enjoying, whatever it is that gives us pleasure, there's a part of our brain, the VTA, which is the ventral tegmental area. VTA releases dopamine, and that travels to that pleasure part of our brain, the nucleus accumbens, which is the brain's pleasure and motivation center. So they kind of go in tandem, right? So we're kind of motivated by pleasure. Things that we enjoy are things we want to keep doing. So I find that when I work with people who are feeling pretty low and lack motivation, I look for the simplest way to get a dopamine reward. And sometimes that's like super simple pleasures, playful pleasures that have no intensity or necessity to them. So I'm a super playful, kind of weird person. And when I need to get a little dopamine hit, I will literally play with toys, whether it's like puppets or dolls. Like I get into my inner child in the most hardcore way you can imagine, mostly to shift a lot of like whatever I'm feeling. I want to kick in a dopamine hit. So, you know, for me, it's a lot easier than eating like an entire chocolate cake, or doing other things I have sought in the past to be able to get the dopamine hits. I've moved it over. Although I've always had a really playful side to me, I've like really kicked it in the last 5 or 10 years. That I'm redirecting the energy to use it in a more playful, creative way. So even sometimes it's like playing games, like children's games, like Uno, or anything that can also give you a dopamine hit where you feel like you've accomplished something. I also like, we have this like plastic axe throwing game. I like just sometimes just throwing something is really satisfying. So whatever gets you that little hit, whether you need, whether your go-to is food or sex or touch or whatever it happens to be, laughter is great for that too. Get that reward system hit. I also like to have at least like a good 5 to 10 minutes of laughing every day. So I will find anything that will make me laugh. And sometimes it's the same silly, dumb thing that I've watched 100 times already, but it gets me going. My go-tos are usually like sketch comedy of different sorts, like Saturday Night Live skits, even from like 50 years ago, or for those of you who are in Canada or are familiar with Kids in the Hall, they crack me up too. Some Americans are aware of them too, but I don't think they ever made it overseas. All kinds of different sketch comedies too, like Monty Python, like anything that can give me like a 5 minute sketch that gets me laughing, that can switch up feeling kind of crummy, gets your dopamine going, gets that dopaminergic pathway kicking in, gets your body to start to release more dopamine so that you feel happier. And you also feel more motivated. So the more laughter you have, the more motivation you also have. They tend to go on in tandem. So if you're feeling a lack of motivation, remember to laugh every day for like 5 or 10 minutes. And I personally know that lately I've had some like low days of motivation. So I might just get up and watch something, laugh, and then get my day going. I also do it at night just so that I can go to bed and try and clear my head of stresses. I've had a lot of extra stresses that I didn't really ever require. Not mine, they're not totally my stresses, but I've chosen to take them on to assist family members. So that sometimes happens where we need to get more dopamine kicking in. We're going to talk about more of our neurobiological processes that kick in our pleasure when we come back from this commercial break. You're listening to the Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network. We'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show, with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email become a host at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at inspiredchoicesnetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. For those of you who are joining today and you're thinking, wow, that mind-body connection for pleasure is really interesting. I'd like to know more, or I'd like to maybe experience some things that I will maybe give you guys a little look-see into, but not a whole lot of detail, and you want to know more about it. If you ever want to connect with me, you can go to my website, milicajelenic.com. And on there, if you're lucky, you might find a booking link. Actually, there is a booking link on there. What I actually encourage you to do first is go and get my do's, don'ts, maybes list, which will give you, it's my yes, no's, maybes list. I realized that I reworded that. It just gives you some ideas on different things you can do. Like if you're kind of feeling like stalemate in the bedroom and you need a little dopamine hit, go to that yes, no's, maybes list. It'll give you some ideas of, different things you can do, different locations, different toys you can add. It's pretty vanilla, but it can bring up some ideas. So at least you're not at a lack for information or ideas. It gets you started and you can always add to it. So yeah, you can get on my mailing list from there. And if you're lucky, you might find that through my mailing list that you get invited to be able to have the opportunity once in a blue moon to be able to get on a call with me for free. I'm not offering it as I used to all the time, but I am going to be offering it once in a blue moon. So remember to get on my mailing list if that's something that you want to be able to get the opportunity that once in a blue moon to be able to get on a free call with me, or by all means, just book a call. Get that list anyway, because it's really helpful to go through and look at your yes, no's, maybes and see what you're into. And of course, add to it. And if you'd like to add to it and talk to me more about what you'd like to add to it, happy to do that. So just before we went to commercial, we were talking about the different parts of the brain, the neurobiological processes that are involved with pleasure. And we were talking about the reward system, which is also known as the dopaminergic pathway. And there's also other parts as well. So we're also going to be talking about the limbic system and emotional pleasure. And we're also going to be talking about the parasympathetic versus sympathetic as well. So the limbic system is really, for me, and I think for a lot of people, but you might not realize it, is so key because I respond a lot to different things like smells. And for example, my husband has, I don't know what it is about his armpits, but I absolutely love his armpits. And the first time we went on a date, it was like summer, and we didn't really go anywhere. I'll leave it at that. We stayed home. But he had something about him. He was probably working that day, and maybe it was just like the heat. I don't know. But his armpits were phenomenal. And to this day, whenever I smell something that's remotely like that, my body is just like, whoa, I love it. I love that smell. A little musky, a little lovely. I love it. And so the part of my body, my brain that's lighting up is the limbic system. So scents that remind you of something or that turn you on, or even scents that turn you off. And you're like, oh, that reminds me of an abuser. There are smells that absolutely remind me of abuse. And oh, wow, can I get turned off fast? That smell, those smells are all linked to the limbic system. But the smells that are linked specifically to pleasure are absolutely linked to the limbic system. So you will find that the fight or flight will kick into with different parts of your body going, oh, I don't really want to smell that. And then, oh, here I go, off I go. So your body will respond in different ways. There are also things like parts of your brain, like the amygdala and your hippocampus, which contribute to different emotional aspects of pleasure. Things like memories that you remember maybe having like a really great massage, or, being put up against a wall and like thrust actively in a hotel room. Like those things will bring your amygdala and your hippocampus in to help you remember all those pleasurable experiences. So it's kind of wild when you think about how much of our body is involved, but how much of it is our nervous system and our brain, and how all of that's connected to our touch, and our senses are all connected in there as well. It's mind-boggling. Like, don't you guys find it mind-boggling? I find it amazing that, yes, even though we know this information, and a lot of this information has been out for well over 50 years, probably 40 or 50 years. Yeah, probably 40, maybe 40 or 50 years, or especially around scent is a little bit newer, with understanding scent. And how it affects the body, although we knew that it did. We just didn't necessarily know what parts of the body it affected. So Masters and Johnson did work on that too. But I just find it fascinating how our bodies are just so, they have so many parts that tell us that pleasure is part of our natural way of being. Like the clitoris alone tells us that bodies are built for pleasure, because there is no other purpose for the clitoris other than pleasure. So it's amazing. Our bodies are designed for it. And we have so many ways that we can release things like dopamine and get our bodies to kick in and have our bodies remember sensations that give us pleasure. It's just phenomenal. It's fascinating. So the other thing that we have going on is the parasympathetic versus sympathetic. So nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system, or short is SMS, is the fight or flight. So that gets your body into fight or flight. It raises your heart rate. It gets you going. It can create a lot of stress, a lot of tension. It can create anxiety as well. And it can, if you have chronic sympathetic nervous system activation, it can block pleasure because your body doesn't care at that point that you want pleasure. It's just trying to survive. Our bodies have the most pleasure when they're calm, when your parasympathetic nervous system is calm. And your parasympathetic nervous system can also go into overdrive as well, as part of the response to stresses and traumas. However, you can have your parasympathetic nervous system be calm. And as we relax, sometimes you can relax so much that you shut off where you're like disconnected. That's problematic, but we want to be relaxed and connected in order to feel deep pleasure. So different things can bring us into parasympathetic calm rather than parasympathetic overdrive, which can be more like depression. And that's just like, it's a whole other experience as part of the polyvagal response. So the parasympathetic nervous system, when you start to do breathing techniques where you're, say, even starting with like regulating your breath with in for 5 and out for 5. In for 5, out for 5. It's going to have you breathe a little bit deeper. You can do more complicated breath work for sure. There's amazing breath work practitioners out there in the world, somatic breath work, holotropic breath work, which are, all from yoga practices, pranayama yoga practices. Essentially, they all just kind of knockoffs of that, but marketed in new ways for people to not have to study their entire lives. Cool. So we have breathing techniques that help our nervous system calm down. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen like a kid who's in stress and who's given the opportunity to go through stress on their own without interference. Like maybe they get scared. They might run for a bit, and then when they find that they're in a place where they're safe, they might stop and they might take some deep breaths and start to regulate their own breathing if they've been given permission. So what I do notice when people interfere with that and they're like, what are you running from? What are you crying for? What's wrong? Like as soon as you start throwing that stuff out, then the brain is going to kick in and it's going to start to try and find other solutions. And the breathing starts to slow, like it's not slow down. It starts to like hyperventilation almost that's not controlled or regulated, which you can do hyperventilating that is controlled, purposeful in order to release tension and stress in your body. But when it's hyperventilation that you haven't chosen to do, then your body gets into that fight or flight. So you get out of calm. And if given the opportunity, though, we are naturally designed to be able to release that. And we're naturally designed, if you watch animals in general, they do that. They have ways to be able to find calm in their body. We have a lot of interference from societal, cultural, different influences that would say you need to behave a certain way. So you need to, stop crying, stop doing this, stop. It was like, okay, well, no, you know what? There are places where if you need to cry or scream, go do that, but not everybody wants to hear it. So go do it in your own place and space. And if you need to hyperventilate, cool. You don't have to stop a person from that. If they're asking for your help because they're hyperventilating to the point where they're like choking on their tongue or having an asthma attack, that's different. And they maybe need help to regulate that. But if we were all taught and allowed to have, to be able to learn how to control our breath and to be able to learn how to create hyperventilation when we want to release something or also learn how to do regulated breathing that's more like in for 5, out for 5, just regular deep breathing. If we were taught that in kindergarten, just as a practice, it would be incredibly helpful for parents as well, but to be able to teach this to kids so that when they are at school, they can find ways to calm themselves down. Incredibly helpful for teachers to be able to facilitate that too. And I do know that there are kindergartens now out there that are teaching self-regulation. I mean, we're talking about the different ways for your body to receive pleasure. And I realize that that might sound weird that I'm saying start in kindergarten. Actually, I would say like start from the moment you're born. Start from maybe even in utero, as the parent holding the child in utero. Maybe you learn how to do these things so that passes on, and then your child doesn't have stress hormones in utero. And then they learn how to navigate that too, and their body will pick up things differently. So if you're under a lot of stress and you are, pregnant, you're going to find that that does transfer over to the baby. That's going to be creating a lot of, it's like being in a war zone environmentally for the baby. So learn how to regulate those things. I didn't know how to regulate those very well at the time when I was pregnant. I knew that that was a possibility, and I also did not, I didn't know enough, right? So happy to help anybody who's going through that now. If you're like, oh, that would be great to know, I'm going through that right now, happy to assist and contribute to you. When we come back, we're going to talk about the chemicals of dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, all those like happy hormone pleasure chemicals. When we come back, you're listening to the Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network. We'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show, with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we are talking all about the mind-body connection to pleasure. And in the last segment, we were talking about some of the neurobiological processes involved. So we're talking about parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, the limbic system. We were also talking about the dopaminergic pathways. And in this section, we're going to be talking about those actual chemicals, which we talked a little bit about dopamine through the dopaminergic pathways. So dopamine is released through the nucleus accumbens. And what we know about dopamine, and I'm sure there's a lot we still don't know, but dopamine is released when we are either experience things or we anticipate experience things, which is like sometimes the anticipation itself can actually kick in dopamine. Now, what can happen is if you've had a lot of times where you have anticipation, 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 and then there's no follow through, eventually your body will not respond to the anticipation as much. I don't know if there's actual research on that. I'm speaking from like uh, experience and seeing this in people that I know. It's like if you're always being promised something and then that promise doesn't come through. It's like a little kid, if they've been asking every year at Christmas for the same thing, and it never comes through, eventually they just surrender and figure they're never going to get that reward. And sometimes that not getting that reward can actually lead to the desire to not try. I was just watching this interesting experiment that a teacher had done in a classroom where the teacher had given one side of the classroom 3 words and another side of the classroom another 3 words. And at the very bottom, so the 3 words that they had, they were supposed to be able to turn them into something else. And the one side of the classroom had different words than the other side. So the side that had the words that made sense and could actually give them um, an answer. So one of the words was bat, and you could turn that into tab. And then another one was like, oh, I can't remember what the other one was. Oh, it was like lemon. It could be turned into melon. And then the last one was like something or other that could be turned into America. And the people and then they would have to raise their hands when they got the answer correct. And so the people on the one side who had words that had no way that they were definitely going to fail and there was no way they were going to actually experience something pleasurable, by the third word, they'd given up. So within 5 minutes, without getting the reward, they just were like, forget it. They didn't even try. And the ones who were given the reward of getting a yes and that they were accomplishing things, they kept on going. So our desire to actually commit to something can drop really fast when the anticipation is not met with actualizing it. So if, it's like being led on, right? Eventually you're just like, whatever. But there is a hit that comes, there's a dopamine hit that comes, and that sometimes that anticipation becomes almost like an addiction. So the anticipation is like, yes, finally, yes, another, it's like, oh, I just bought a lottery ticket. Yeah, it could be this time. That anticipation. Eventually, you give up on buying the lottery tickets because you haven't won. Although I just recently won a free ticket, so yay, yay, free ticket. I guess that's like winning. But yeah, we want to be able to experience pleasure. We want the rewards, and when we don't get them, that can be devastating. So if you're finding that you're not getting rewards, like pleasurable rewards in life in general, you need to kind of start on things where you're going to be guaranteed rewards. Like if you know that if you do something, say, make it simple, right? Like, say you happen to get some nice bread and you're going to make toast, and you know your toaster is going to work, and you know that the toast is going to work. Then when you go to make the toast and the toast works, you can be like, yes, I have a win. Now, if even that is something so simple isn't working for you, or you're at a level where in your life where you're like, I don't even have that, I don't even care, you can use very, very simple things as your reward, like waking up in the morning and getting out of bed. That's a win. So, but you need to acknowledge these things when you have hit super lows. You need to acknowledge these wins that are simple wins, like I got out of bed today, and like congratulate yourself and look yourself in the mirror and go, I did this. I got out of bed today. I didn't want to. I didn't think I was going to, and I did it anyway, right? So you got to be able to, and then breathe it in and like, oh, I did that. Like I did this. I didn't think I could. I didn't want to. I really just wanted to like wither away and die. But I got out of bed and I looked at myself, and here I am. I'm awake and I'm standing. I did it. I chose this. Breathe it in. Let your body relax into this, because one of the weirdest things is we don't actually know how to relax into any happiness or joy or rewards. We tend to be really accustomed to stress. We know how to adapt to stress really well. We haven't generally, as a society, haven't really learned how to adapt to joy. So we can have it for a fleeting minute, but we can have stress for incredibly long periods of time and think that's normal. And because that's what we've regulated our bodies to, but we haven't really regulated to joy. So as the dopamine hits come in, breathe it in, let your body regulate to that and know, yeah, I'm allowed to have this. I'm allowed to have like rewards. I'm allowed to feel good about my choices. I'm allowed to experience this in a joyful way. So it's that rush, that your body can get of like pleasures coming. Like even if you're on a roller coaster and you're like right at that top and you're about to go down and you're like, whoa, that rush, that's a dopamine hit. Jumping out of an airplane, skydiving or orgasms or any of that where you can feel the rush of excitement, your heartbeat starts to go, you start to get flushed, everything is like kicking in, your dopamine's kicking in. That hit is what a lot of people are feeling like they're lacking when they're hitting like depression. And sometimes the dopamine hits nowadays are coming from social media. They're coming from sources where the hits are so fast that it's like our bodies are becoming addicted to that. So I encourage you to find dopamine hits that are things that might take your body a little bit longer. There's a little maybe like anticipation and then follow through for sure, but it's not like an automatic hit. And if you are watching something that would help you laugh, get your limbic system kicking in, uh, your amygdala and all that, like getting you to have some laughter and some joy, then one of the things you can, do is make sure that you're not watching it on your phone so that your phone is like right in your face all the time and just like that blue light and the frequencies coming off of it. It's really hard on your body. If you're watching it, watch it from a distance, that you can see it on TV and just limit it to 5 to 10 minutes. Because if you start to go for like a 3 hour hit, then it's going to be really hard. It's like your body becomes addicted to that amount of dopamine hits like repeatedly. And then it's going to be harder to get to that high, we'll say again, like that high of pleasure again. So in order to have your body be able to function at a level that isn't like an addict, you want to be able to regulate your behaviors more and have those hormones be more balanced. So then we have oxytocin, which is the love and bonding hormone, which we can get from things like hugging. If you don't have peoples to hug, you might have pets to hug. Great. You might not have pets to hug, but you might have plants that you can hug. Thing is, it's like really great to get it from living beings. A lot of people do get it from their cats and dogs, and from their other humans. And some people don't really like touch. Like my mom is not a touch person. She gets her oxytocin just from bonding with talking. She doesn't really need the touch part so much, although oxytocin generally is released through touch, through intimacy, through orgasm, and through emotional connection. She goes for the emotional connection part. There's lots of ways you can get that bonding going on. So if you're needing a little oxytocin, if you're needing to feel loved, you need to feel connected, then and you don't have resources right now, whether you might have family, you might have friends. If you're somebody who doesn't have any of those, there are groups out there that are like cuddle groups. I know that when I would go into bigger cities, you could almost always look up on meetup.com. You could almost always find somewhere that has cuddle groups. Yes, you're cuddling with strangers, la la la, but you're getting cuddles in, and most people are there for the same reason. They all need their oxytocin hit. So one of the things that you might want to do for that is, find your source. Or if you don't really like cuddling people, you could always ask if you can, go into a pet store. If you like animals, you could volunteer at the Humane Society to hug dogs and cats and get your oxytocin hits there as well. So it doesn't have to be people. It really does have to do with touch. And sometimes when it is pets that you're hugging, you might just find that your body can relax more because there isn't the expectation of sex happening. Well, I'd hope not anyway. So want to be able to have your body relax so that you can have more trust and have deeper attachment and connection with your partner. So cuddling for, they say 20 to 30 seconds, but I dare you go longer, 35, 50. And you can also give eye contact. So we talked about this in one of the episodes. Try not to look at both eyes because your eyes will get kind of crossed. But if you can look at one or the other, like look at the left eye or the right eye, and you each do the same eye, you can have prolonged eye contact that will help you feel more deeply connected to each other. Those hugs that last more than 20 seconds, when you are hugging, remember to breathe. Like breathe in through your nose, and when you breathe out, breathe and let that breath go all the way through your body, through your heart, connecting the energy from you to your partner at the heart, connecting through your groin, like your genitals, connect the energy there if you're lovers. Otherwise, that might be invasive for some people. Connect into the ground as well. So let your body connect through mind, heart, whether, if you're lovers, connect through your genitals, and then connect through the earth as well. Let that breath move. I don't even know where the time's going, but we are going to come back and talk about endorphins after this break. And then I might even have a little time to give you guys a little walkthrough for a little meditation to have a little experience. But we're also gonna, I've got so many things to say. All right, I'm so glad this is a two-parter. You are listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show, with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is The Pleasure Zone with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email, info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, my sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we are geeking out on the mind-body connection for pleasure, and talking about this show has been mainly dedicated to the neurobiological responses in the body, and we're talking about things like different systems that are kicking in, like the sympathetic, parasympathetic, the limbic system. We're talking about also different hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, also endorphins. Serotonin is an interesting one because you need to actually have things that convert to serotonin and then to melatonin. And tryptophan is one of those things that converts to serotonin and melatonin, and that comes through foods. So I know you're probably used to hearing people talk about like turkey for that. There's a lot of foods that have that are high in tryptophan. Eggs as well are high in tryptophan, and some things. You just go look up some high tryptophan foods. I have that actually in a course that I have on my website called the Happy Hormones course. All that information is in there, along with foods that you can have that can help with all of these different biochemicals in your body, different actions you can take daily. There's even some things you can log about your activities. And then there are also different things you can do naturally, like herbal options, and a bunch of different. I did the course a few years ago. It's actually quite extensive for a 4-part series. So I think you'd enjoy it. So if you're interested in doing a Happy Hormones course, you can find that on my website at milicajelenic.com. So we're moving on to endorphins because I want to be able to talk about that before the show is up, and hopefully I can hit on some other things quickly before before this episode is over. So endorphins are, by their very nature, they're natural painkillers, and they're also considered the bliss chemical. So natural painkillers are like, if you were out in the woods, if you go out in the woods today, well, if you went out to the woods, I say that because I live in the woods, and like, say for example, a tree fell on my leg and I happened to have a knife on me, and I could cut my leg off to get the knife, to get my leg out from being stuck under a tree, because I've been in the deep woods and nobody's found me for a week and I'm starting to get hungry. So I cut my leg off. The endorphins that would kick in would be enough to help me survive the pain and then be able to probably get me to a place of safety before I then collapse and then have to be, taken to emergency. But I gave you an extreme example. However, that is the painkiller is what natural painkillers are what kicks in too, with when you give birth and you're like, oh, and then there's like this, the endorphins will kick in, you get the bliss happening, and then like I don't know, pain reduction. Maybe I had a lot of that happening because I had quite a good experience. I mean, it was intense, but it was good. It was fast. I mean, I've heard some horror stories and I was like, wow, I was in labor for half an hour. Not even, I pushed 5 times, and it was like, because you guys want to know the details. But endorphins are really, really helpful with as natural painkillers. So they reduce both pain and stress, and they also can increase pleasure and relaxation. So as we know, relaxation is really key to get your body out of that fight or flight and to bring your body into parasympathetic calm so that you can feel relaxed, so you can experience more pleasure. So endorphins are released during a few things like exercise and laughter, deep touch, and orgasm. How fantastic is that, right? And sometimes you might have like that afterglow after sex, or even like the afterglow of after giving birth. There is a sense of peace, and or like, it's kind of like the satisfaction you get after a workout. All of that all have to do with the endorphins that are coming through. If you want to boost your endorphins, get active. So get yourself walking, get your heartbeat raising, laughing your head off. And you could go for even like massage, where you're kind of like really getting into getting the endorphins released and getting your body to have to surrender. There's lots of BDSM play that helps with endorphins as well, especially when there's bondage involved, like being tied up can be really helpful for that. Pressure of spanking can be helpful as well. That's just a side note for my kinky friends out there. So we've got like 2 kinds of ways that our body has. We've got fast pleasure in our body, and we've got more like deep pleasure. So the fast pleasure is that dopamine pleasure, and then we've got the deep pleasure, which is more like oxytocin driven pleasure. So they're both absolutely pleasure related, but they come in different ways to our bodies. And I think sometimes we can get into like the fast pleasure, where we're like seeking fast hits repeatedly, and that can be exhausting for the body. So that's more the dopamine driven ones. So if you're looking for something, you can mix it up, right? So for example, the fast pleasure comes from like quick, intense highs, and the deep pleasure comes from slow, lasting pleasure. So both of them are valid. Both of them are great. But if you're doing a lot of dopamine hits, you're probably going to find that your body gets quite tired. So it can lead to addictions. It can lead to crashes. If you're going for the oxytocin kind of deep pleasure, you're going to find that it's going to build deeper connections. It's going to give you a sense of also emotional safety. And what does that mean? Because a lot of people are like, what does it mean to be safe? It means that your body isn't in fight or flight and you can receive. So go have some really fun oxytocin pleasure related.
Thank you for choosing to listen to The Pleasure Zone with sex, relationship, and intimacy coach, Milica Jelenic. We'll return next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.